Welcome to Stitches and Stories Studio, where stories begin. Hosted by author Millie Story, this weekly podcast is a cozy corner for writers, readers, dreamers, and creative hearts who believe stories still have the power to connect us, comfort us, and call us forward. Here we talk about writing, publishing, creativity, craft, and the courage it takes to begin, or begin again, one page at a time. Whether you're starting your first draft, finding your way through revision, learning the business of books, or simply looking for encouragement to keep going, you're in the right place. Now, here's your host, Millie Story.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Stitches and Stories Studio, where stories begin. I'm Millie, and I'm so glad that you're here with me this week. Go ahead and settle in, pour the coffee, warm up the tea, find your favorite chair, take me along while you walk the dog or fold the laundry, or sit in the driveway for that extra 3 minutes because the house is loud and the car is quiet. No judgment here. My car has hosted many a deep thought. I wanted to share with you this week. It marks my 31st wedding anniversary, which feels like sort of a milestone that ought to come with some wisdom, soft lighting, and maybe a cake baked by someone else. 31 years is a long time to share a life with another person, and it's also a long time for that someone to live beside a writer. That sort of feels like it needs its own commemorative plaque. Because writers as a species, well, we can be a little unusual. We may be physically present at the dinner table while mentally stranded on a spaceship, interrogating a murder suspect, repairing a plot hole, or wondering whether a character would realistically know how to hotwire a vehicle. We may announce with no warning whatsoever that we've solved a major story problem while the other person is trying to watch the television show. We may also ask questions like, how long do you think someone could survive if? And then wonder why the room has gone completely quiet. So this week I've been thinking a lot about the people who support our writing lives. The spouses and partners, children, friends, sisters, cousins, coworkers, and patient souls who listen while we explain a plot that they will probably never read. They are the ones who understand that I'll be there in 5 minutes can mean 5 minutes, 20 minutes, or one paragraph from now. They make space for the dream even when the dream takes up the dining room table, all the good pens, and half the weekend. Writing may look like a solitary endeavor from the outside, but most writers are held up by a quiet scaffolding of support. Someone who gives us room, believes in us before the book is even finished, asks how the story's going, and pretends not to notice when we are muttering dialogue in the kitchen. And we need to care for these people too. Now, that does not mean, or that does not have to mean grand gestures. It can be something as simple as closing the laptop when someone we love is speaking, saying thank you for ordinary kindness that makes creative work possible, and remembering that our writing goals matter, but so do the people that cheer us on. A creative life needs devotion, but it also needs balance. While our stories are important, so are anniversaries, dinners, dog walks, phone calls, porch conversations, and the people who remind us that we are more than the book we're trying to finish. So here's my gentle thought for the week. Take a moment to thank someone who supports your creative life. Thank the person who gives you time, the person who listens, and the person who believes that you're a writer even on the days when you feel you're mostly just rearranging sentences and drinking coffee with ambition. And if you are the support person for a writer, bless you. You are doing noble work, probably confusing work, often alarming work, but it's noble all the same. As for me, I'm celebrating 31 years of marriage this week, and I'm grateful for the life, the love, the patience, and the room to keep telling stories. Writers may be quirky, but we do come with excellent imaginary real estate. Now, my wedding anniversary is not also my writing anniversary. My writing anniversary is in September. But milestones have a way of gathering around each other. And lately I've been thinking about the fact that I've been publishing since 2017. That means I'm coming up on 9 years of living with books out in the world, learning the business one decision and one mistake at a time, and growing as a writer in public, which is both a privilege and occasionally very humbling. So today I want to talk about what those years have taught me, why our older books still matter, also known as our backlist, and whether it might be time to consider an anniversary edition for that first book that led to a trilogy that started this journey for me. So let's talk about writing and publishing and what almost 9 years of being a published author has taught me. When I first published in 2017, it felt like reaching the finish line. And I think a lot of writers sort of feel that way with the first book. You spend so much time trying to finish the manuscript, revise it, figure out what a blurb is supposed to do, choosing the cover, formatting the book, uploading files, checking the previewer in absolute panic, and then check it again, and then finally hit publish. And by the time that book goes live, it feels like you've crossed a mountain. And in some ways, you have. Finishing and publishing a book is a big deal. It deserves celebration. It deserves cake. It deserves someone saying, you did it because you did. But what I understand now, almost 9 years later, is that the first book is not the finish line, it's the starting gate. That first book teaches you how to finish. The next books teach you how to keep going. And those are two very different skills. So, finishing a book takes focus, belief, stubbornness, and a little creative delusion. You have to believe the story matters before anyone else has a reason to believe it. Keeping going takes patience, and the humility, a willingness to learn in full view, in public with everyone watching. That means they also can see your mistakes. Because once your books are out there, your growth becomes visible and your early choices are visible too. Old covers, early blurbs, those first formatting decisions, first attempt at branding, all that becomes the trail you leave behind. That can be a little uncomfortable, but it's also proof that you started, and that's what matters. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that you learn by doing, not by endless preparing. And you can read every craft book on the shelf, listen to podcasts, take classes, download checklists, make beautiful notebooks, organize your writing life until your planner looks like it could run a small nation. And I say that because I've done all of those things. And all of those things can help. But at some point, the learning happens because you write the book, you publish the book, you see what worked, you notice what didn't, and you decide, what do you want to do better next time? Where is the growth potential? And that's where the real education begins. Publishing also teaches you that writing the book is only part of the author life, and particularly for indie authors. There's the covers, the blurbs, the formatting, newsletters, metadata. What the heck is that? Categories, distribution decisions, pricing, direct sales, social media, reader expectations and tropes, reviews, back matter, the series, branding all become part of the work. And nobody learns all of that all at once. Um, Most of us learn it one pothole at a time. And sometimes we hit that same pothole twice just to make sure it's still there, though. But here's the encouraging part, all of this adds up. 9 years in, you can look back and see growth, at least I can. And I can see, oh, you know, in hindsight, I can't see it always while it's happening. But looking back, I can see how far I've come, how my voice has gotten stronger, pace has improved, characters gain depth, scenes carry more purpose, and my confidence grows on the page in very quiet layers. And that can be hard to measure day by day, year by year, but year by year and by book, looking back, it becomes more visible. It's hard to do with only one book, but when you've got three, four, or more, it's you can start to see your own pattern building. And the book that started your writing life may not show every skill you have now, but it shows the courage that you had then and how brave you were to hit that publish button. And we need to think about that as an honor. So let's talk a little bit about the older work, the backlist, because if you've been writing for any length of time, sooner or later, you will open something you wrote years ago and have a moment. It might be small, or it could be a full body spiritual event. You may find a sentence that makes you think, well, bless my heart, I was enthusiastic. There may be a dramatic weather description doing far more work than the weather ever agreed to. A semicolon may be standing proudly in a place where no semicolon should be left unsupervised. And if you're anything like me, you could be tempted to cringe. But I want to be careful with that because our older work deserves more kindness than that. Those early books were written by the version of us who were brave enough to even begin. That writer may not have known everything we know now, but she made choices that maybe we would handle differently today, but she finished something. She took a dream seriously and made the next version of us possible. So when you look back at those older books, the goal should not be to ridicule them. The goal should be to understand them. We can ask what we were trying to do then, what we knew at the time, what we still had to learn, which parts of the story still hold up, and where we can still see the heart of a writer that we are today. But that last question does matter because sometimes when you look back, you find that the craft has changed, packaging needs updating, formatting could use a refresh, but the heart of the story is still there, and that's worth noticing. Our older books are more than old files on a hard drive or titles sitting quietly in the backlist. They're markers and milestones. They show where we began, where we came from, what mattered to us at the time, what themes we were already circling before we understood them. And sometimes you can see the roots of your current writing in those early books. A familiar character or a moral question, a setting, a hope, maybe a fascination that may have been there from the beginning, quietly following you into your later work. And that's awesome creative evidence. And it can be surprisingly tender. Growth does not require any sort of embarrassment over where we started. It lets us see it clearly, maybe, appreciate it honestly, and decide what still serves the reader. Which brings me to the next question I've been asking myself: what to do with those older books? Since my first book and trilogy that were started publishing back in 2017, I've been thinking about whether to do an anniversary edition and if that makes sense. And it's an interesting question for any author with older work. Is it worth revisiting the book? Is it better just to leave it alone? And how do you know whether you're refreshing something or trying to rewrite your entire past? Because let me tell you, the second option can become a swamp with bookmarks. An anniversary edition can be a celebration. It does not have to be an apology. And I think that's critical to remember. Why do I want to do this anniversary revision? Now, certainly the book could do with some refresh because the way I craft the story has improved. There's probably a lot that could be cut from that first book. Um, but that first book is also still one of my better sellers. And people still love the story behind it, even if my craft isn't what it is today. It's grown since then, and there's no shame in that. That's kind of the whole point. So, I have to be honest with myself and do I want to redo it because I want to make the story better or if I just want to hide those early mistakes? And I think I've come to the conclusion that I just want to make it a better story, make it more enjoyable. People who are still buying it 9 years later, I want to make sure they're getting a great story and that they're getting the best parts of me that I can offer as far as my storytelling. Plus, I just really can't let go of those early characters. The Maggie Gray trilogy, uh, I'd still like to go back and create a universe around that, and have those three books just be part of a larger universe, and take some of the other characters besides Maggie and create new stories out of it. So but uh, that's getting a little bit ahead of myself. So, um, you know, the book wasn't wrong, and I don't really have this urge to necessarily fix it, but it could certainly do with a spit and polish. And back in 2017, I didn't know anything. I mean, I had taken classes, I had been to conferences, I had read all kinds of books. I didn't just write it with in a vacuum. I talked to people. There were people like Chris Kennedy who were available f- at a moment's notice to answer questions, which was so generous of his time. And I did hire professional um, book cover artists and things like that. I mean, I followed all the steps. I did all the things. So it and it's not like it's horrible, but you know, I had to do the format um, by hand in Word, which if you've ever tried to do that, that's a nightmare. I didn't have tools like Vellum then. I think it was probably available, but I probably couldn't afford it back then. So, I was just sort of doing it from scratch. And I'm glad I did though, because I'm glad I had those experiences and those headaches and those trials and tribulations because it taught me some skills that are certainly useful. It makes me appreciate the tools that I have now and grateful that, I can now afford some of those tools that maybe I couldn't back then. So, and you appreciate how much easier it makes your life when you had to do it um, the old fashioned way, let's call it, and the hard way, in my opinion, and learning what, the gutter pan means and your bleed and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if you don't have to do that by hand, it's you don't understand it sometimes when this program does it for you. And then if the program makes an error and you don't realize it, that can be a problem. So I'm glad I learned those things. Plus, back in the day when I was in high school, I was on the newspaper, committee, journalism club. We had to do hand layouts of our articles because the school newspaper was in print. Um, and we had to figure out how to place articles and how to get them to go to the next page and where to put the pictures and, all of that good stuff. And I think that helped me many years later when I was trying to format these books. It's a little bit different for sure, but some of the terminology and some of the requirements are still the same. So back to visiting your backlist. I know some of you are probably thinking, why are we talking backlist? I'm not even finished with my first book. But it's good to look ahead in planning, even when you're writing your first book, because particularly if you want to write in a series, these are some things to keep in mind going forward. So you don't kind of get 4 books in and think, gosh, I wish I had thought about that 3 books ago. So just kind of keep in mind as you're working towards a book 2, a book 3, even if they're particularly if they're serious, but even if it's standalone, if you do poetry or something like that, um, just be thinking about these types of things for the future. So this, my first book, it started out as something important and I wanted to bring it into the world. But now I'm thinking I also kind of want to bring it into my current season of my writing life. And it can mean a refreshed cover, although I really love my original covers. The artist did such a good job. Um, William Hebe of Bold Fox Designs did an awesome job on all 3 covers. Um, but it needs to fit the current brand. Um, the formatting could probably be, I mean, it all meets, and the format all meets, but the requirements, but it could probably use a little brush up, some of the things like the breaks and that sort of thing. Um, could be a little fresher. Um, the print and ebook editions, correct any existing typos that are still in there, update the back matter for sure, uh, a new author note and how the book began and what it means to me now, kind of a retrospective author's note for the anniversary edition. I can include some bonus scenes because I did keep all my previous versions, for deleted scenes, things like that. And maybe offer some reading group notes or special introduction, things that can just kind of add to the book and give it a little extra layering to it, a little bit more information, hopefully make it more enjoyable for new readers and even those who've read it before. Some of the super fans out there who just love Maggie Gray's story. But none of these things require changing the soul of my book. And, does the story still represent the heart of what I wanted to say at the time? And the answer is yes. So the book doesn't need to be rebuilt. It might need a little reframing and some polish, maybe a doorway into today's readers. But it's still, I think the heart of the story is still there. Now, if it was a little bit more dated, and the answer to those questions were no, that's a different decision. A deeper revision may be worth considering, and those choices deserve honesty, not panic. You don't need to panic about it, but need to be honest about it. And those kind of situations might apply more if you have written something nonfiction, something instructional that maybe some of the material's now dated and you want to change that, or the world has changed a lot. Maybe you wrote something nonfiction and 9 years ago. Well, certainly, just technology has changed so much in the past 9 years, not to mention just the world in general. So, it may be more of a broader overhaul than just sort of a updating situation. So, because the time spent revising an older book is not time spent writing a new one, I want to be careful about um, what needs attention in my backlist. And I really think right now it's just these three books, and doing something on Kickstarter with some special editions with the sprayed edges, and just make it a really nice collectible kind of book, a beautiful book, um, as well as doing some updates to it. But both of those, I mean, even if I don't do anything with sprayed edges, just updating it in the ebook version, it would would be beneficial to the readers, I think. But I definitely want to do something really extra special for the anniversary, for 10-year anniversary. I think that's going to be. I'm kind of excited about it. I think it's really going to be awesome. So uh, it's really less about erasing the younger writer, um, and more about honoring the path from there to where I am today and where I will be in a year. And I can say this is where I began and this is what I've learned. And this story has a place. From a business standpoint, it gives authors a natural reason to talk about older work again. And I think that's important. One of the strange things about publishing is that we pour our whole hearts into a book. We launch it, we talk about it for a little while, and then somehow we feel awkward mentioning it later as though the book expired, like the yogurt in our fridge. But, the books don't expire. Um, the the backlist is not some dusty old shelf. It's a foundation for the career that you're building. An anniversary edition can remind readers that the book still exists. It invites new readers in. It gives a long-time reader a reason to revisit that story, maybe remind them why they fell in love with your stories to begin with, and, help make a bridge between that older work and newer work. So think of it as part of the whole journey, but give yourself a little more grace there. If you have older books or older stories, or you're working in that direction, and the early creative work is tucked away somewhere, ask yourself whether it matters to you, whether it still serves the reader, and whether a refresh could help reach a new audience. Most of all, ask yourself if you can revisit it without punishing the writer you were then, because you don't want to do that. Be kind to the writer who wrote that book. You needed that person then, and you still need them. So now I'd like to circle back to the people around the writer to support us. Because even though everyone says writing is a solitary um, hobby or solitary function or solitary way of life, um, it's really not built alone. You know, you you've got some support and a minimum, artists and cover artists and editors, but If you have family, spouses, children, parents, friends, um, m- and they're aware that you're writing now, some of you who are first getting started, you may not have told a lot of people that you're writing. Some people, kind of keep it quiet until the thing is done. Um, and that's okay, but you don't have to hide it. There are people who will support you. And if maybe your family doesn't understand, there are plenty of writing groups that you can join and people that you can talk to, and maybe like through your local library, one-on-one or in-person meetings to encourage you. And it's okay to talk to those people because they are where you are or they have been, and they'll understand. But a spouse or partner, friends, children, teachers, writing groups, a newsletter subscriber, another writer, they'll all understand what you're trying to do before you have the words to even explain it. So, support could look like quiet time. Maybe a spouse takes the kids so you can have a few minutes to write, or an early read. A friend reads your early draft before it's polished just to tell you if the story sounds, interesting, or if you're on the right track, or, does it grip them the same way that it grips you? Um, a shared post, an encouraging message, even if someone just sends you a little note and said, "How's the writing going?" All of those things matter, and they're encouraging and they feed your soul. And it may seem small from the outside, but creative people like us, we live for those little signs. We just need a little crumb that says someone believes in what we're doing, and we can use that for months. So it does require a strange combination of both solitude and support. We need the alone time with the page, but we need the people to remind us to come back to earth. Make sure we eat, we go outside, get some sunshine, maybe stop researching suspicious things at midnight. You need that one friend who's willing to clear your browsing history if something happens. I mean, that meme applies to writers at so many levels. So the people around us may not always understand the whole story or what we're building or what we're doing. And they may not remember the character names that we've talked about or understand the subplot on page 213 that caused so much emotional damage in a household. But they support the work and they become part of the story behind the story. And that is definitely worth honoring. So take a moment to thank someone who supports your creative life. Thank them for listening, for giving you time, for asking about your book, and understanding that writing is not just a hobby you squeeze in after everything else. It's part of who you are. And if you are a person who is supporting a writer, again, bless you. It is noble work. It's confusing work. It can be alarming, but we do appreciate it all the same, even if we don't always say so. We're quirky, and we do come with excellent imaginary real estate that is probably frustrating at times, but we are so glad that you are here and we appreciate your love and support. So maybe that's where my wedding anniversary and my writing life meet this week. Not in some grand lesson about marriage and gratitude for long commitments that shape us. It's about the books we write, the people who stand behind us, the dreams that grow because someone made room for them and someone allowed us to act on those dreams. And the older series that deserves to be remembered, refreshed, maybe brought back to the light for a new season. After 31 years of marriage and almost 9 years of being a published author, I'm thinking a lot about staying with the story. All of this work still matters. All of my stories, published and yet to be published, matter. And the people around me, they matter too. And sometimes looking back is how we gather the courage for our next chapter. So if you have an older book or an older project, or even an old dream that's been waiting patiently in the background, maybe take this as your gentle nudge to look at it again. bring new curiosity to it, but bring kindness in the eyes of someone who's grown. And maybe it's time to bring that story back into the light.
Thank you for joining us this week at Stitches and Stories Studio. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more conversations about writing, creativity, publishing, and the storytelling life in the Backlist, available wherever you're listening today. You can also support the podcast by subscribing on Substack or by visiting Buy Me a Coffee. To explore Millie's books and short stories, visit stitchesandstories.com. You can also find her on Facebook, Instagram, and X as Melissa L. Story. For questions, comments, or podcast sponsorship opportunities, please reach out by email at millie@stitchesandstories.com. Thanks again for listening to Stitches and Stories Studio, where stories begin.